Morning, guys. How is everyone? Man, this is awesome. Love seeing you guys back. And if this is your first time here, please do me a favor before you leave. I'd love to visit with you. I've got a book I want to get in your hands. So please come see me before you leave today. Frank wanted me to just let you guys know that he wishes he could be here this morning, but he had some other things to attend to, so wasn't able to make it. We've got a really special treat this morning. We're doing something a little different than usual, and man, Scott is back with us again this morning to bring us a really special treat. So just be sure to see me afterwards to get you a book. We just want to welcome you to the Anchor. Here we meet here every single Friday morning at 6:30. There's a couple Fridays a year that we don't make it, but we'll have that online for you guys to know what days those are. So thanks for being here, and help me to welcome Scott L. Johnson. Morning, guys. Morning. Give me a second to do the technical stuff here. You can switch them over. Thank you.
All right, hopefully that's all the technical stuff I need to do. I may have just reached the end of my ability to do it. I want to do something a little different this morning. Some of you know, many of you know me, and you know that I've been to Africa several times. And last fall, I had a very eventful trip to Africa, and I'm going to take you to Africa with me. How many of you have been to Africa? So after today, I want you to sort of be able to think that maybe you've been there even just for a few minutes. And that's really my goal today. I want to take you with me to Africa. And I want to start by asking you a question. If you were going to Africa or a place like Africa, and you could check a form that said, would you like to meet wonderful local people? How many of you would check that box? How about eat wonderful local food, or maybe some local food that you're not really sure what it is even? We might be up for that. How about have a serious injury while you're on the trip? Anyone check that box off? How about wheelchair service all the way back through the airports? How about an upgrade to business class on the longest flight on the way back? Might check that off, especially if you didn't think it related to having an injury. So I'm going to take you to Africa with me, and I'm just going to explain these pictures as we go. So first of all, this man's name is Asrat Lulu. He's in Ethiopia. I've been to Ethiopia all 4 times. Asrat's trained as an attorney, but he gave up his career to do ministry. And in Ethiopia, most people don't speak English, and they don't have English names. In Kenya, almost everyone has a name that we'd recognize along with their tribal name, but Asrat is Asrat Lulu, that's his whole name. And he's my translator, and he's also just a terrific guy. And this is the hotel where we stayed, the Solyana Hotel. This is a very common sight in Ethiopia. This is how they build buildings. They pour concrete posts, and then they pour concrete decks. There's rebar in there, but you can see the lumber that they use to hold everything up, like to keep everything in place. It's just basically sticks, like really thick sticks or really thin trees, and none of it's dimensional, and they just shave the branches off and kind of bind them together. This is typical. This is a roadside shop. And you see these all over the place where I've been in Ethiopia. This is a Bajaj, B-A-J-A-J, and this was our transportation for most of this week. We had a van on one day for a trip, but this was our transportation most of the week. Basically 2 or maybe 3 people can squeeze in the back. There's power steering, power brakes, forget all of that nonsense. This is driven with a handlebar, and the handlebar is connected directly to the wheel. And it's surprising how agile these things are and how much energy they can have to go up a hill. Like looking at it, you think my lawnmower has a bigger engine, but these are pretty good. What does that look like to you? That's it. That's an Ethiopian Coca-Cola right there. This is the group that I taught in Ethiopia. This is the larger group. In the mornings, I had a smaller group, but it was about 2/3 of this size, and they were people from churches in the general area. In the afternoon, there were some Bible college students that joined us, and you see there's one white guy in the back. His name was Anthony, and I can't remember, he's either from Australia or New Zealand, and he was there teaching the Bible college students in the morning, but he sat in on it when I taught Job in the afternoons, and it was great to meet him there. This is my whiteboard, and so this is all in Amharic, which is the most prevalent language in Ethiopia. So there you see on the left, you kind of see chapters 1 through 42, the summary of the book of Job. On the right, where you see 1 through 6, those are the 6 things that bring about suffering in our world. And this is just part of my teaching on Job. But all this was written by Asrat for me, so that the people that I was teaching could read it and they could understand it. This was the group of women. And you've heard me say before that my oldest son is very single. I want him to come with me sometime because he needs to see these beautiful, beautiful African women. And anyway, I had quite a variety of women in the class. And then, of course, I did have more men than women. And this is the group of men that was in the class. Can you tell which one is me in there? I'm just curious. These are cargo taxis, and they're pulled by mules. And you see people taxis sometimes also, but this is basically a taxi stand in Ethiopia. They're all waiting for cargo or waiting to be sent somewhere. Pretty cool. This is a very common sight. You see trucks that are twice as high as the actual truck with stuff. These were cooking oil jugs that are empty. Presumably they're going to go back to where they're going to get filled with cooking oil, but it's extremely common to see trucks that are, I mean, you just picture the center of gravity, like if he makes a turn too fast, he's going over. I'm sure they know what they're doing. I've never seen one turned over, but that's a very common sight. How about this little guy here? Now that hay is on a cart behind him, but still that looks like a whale of a lot of hay for that little guy to be pulling. Again, a very common sight. We went to a waterfall on Thursday. I kind of had a day off, and Asrat and my 2 hosts, Yosef and Ababa, took me to a waterfall where the Blue Nile River begins. I didn't know any of this. Some of you guys know this, but apparently the Nile is made up of 3 different rivers that come together. And this is where one of them came together. Outside there, before we walked all the way in there, was a school. And the students, there was a bunch of students outside waiting for their afternoon session to begin. It was probably 11:30 in the morning. And so we got to see some of the students, and I just love seeing these kids. This girl probably couldn't have been more than 10 to 12 years old, but the look on her face, doesn't she look like she's about 35? And she wasn't too sure what I was doing, but all these kids were very, very friendly. And I just loved walking through there. None of them spoke English. So on the left there is Ababa, and then Asrat, and then me, and then Yosef. And behind me there you can see this fall where the Blue Nile begins, and eventually it merges with whatever the other 2 are and becomes the Nile. And I'm going to hit play on this, and you can just see the amount of water.
I am right in the midst here. As the pure guide said, I'm getting a shower. This is really something. Wow. My boat is soaked. Good thing it's one of those new water-resistant ones.
That was really something. Am I still sharing? Looks like my share stopped for some reason. So hang on. I'm sorry, guys. Give me just a second here. Let me redo that share. Sorry. I guess it won't. Am I up now? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let me go back to the photo. Then there we go. Maybe I won't play the other videos, but this was a suspension bridge in Ethiopia, and it didn't look like the kind of suspension bridge we would see, but it was at least steel cables. And this kind of thing doesn't bother me, so I walked across it, I think with Yosef, and then we walked back. It was really interesting. No, that was Ababa that walked back and forth with me. I want to say something before I go further, because when I show these photos to a group, I tend to use the word I a lot, because I was there and it's stuff that I did, and it's kind of my story of the trip. But I want to tell you, God gets all the credit for all of this. Sometimes people ask me, how'd you decide to go to Africa? And my answer is, I never decided to go to Africa. I didn't think that I was going. I didn't think that I wasn't going. I had never thought about it. And then a man who was my host and his wife, who was my host for the first time I went in 2014, asked if I would consider going. And it wasn't long before I went over there and taught Job one time. Now when I go, I teach Job, Ruth, Jonah, and Esther. This time I also taught parenting in Kenya, and I taught marriage in Uganda. And both of those were just really, really interesting because there were some cultural differences, yet what I'm teaching is all based on the scriptures. So it was really an interesting time. But when you hear me saying I, it's just because I own the story. But don't make any mistake about it. God gets the credit for everything we're talking about, everything I'm showing you today. This is a little pool hall. Again, it's a roadside stand, just a campus store. And these guys playing pool. You see these a lot in Ethiopia. This is a common sight. This is a young gal carrying cooking oil, one of those yellow jugs we saw in the trucks. This is Ethiopian residential construction. This is typical. There are some nicer homes, but this is very typical for what most of the country lives in. So they band these same sort of sticks together. They put a tin roof on it, and then they start packing it. You want to guess what's in the packing? What's it look like? It's a combination. It's mud and it's dung. It's manure. But what they do is they dry the manure first. It sits in a pile and it's thoroughly dried out before they put it on here. So whatever you might not want to touch in the manure is pretty much gone. And because of the manure, because it has some protein and some fat in it, it will hold up to rain. They still have to redo this every few years, but if it was just mud, it would just get washed away in the first few rainstorms. And they have a months-long rainy season in Ethiopia. Well, okay. This next one is a little bit further along. There we go. Maybe it is time for a new computer. I've been thinking about it. So here's one that's a little further along with some straw in it. And here's one that's painted, and they love bright colors. And so here's another one that's painted. Let me go on from there. We went to an Ethiopian Orthodox monastery, so it's kind of their version of the Catholic Church. And we had to take a boat ride across to an island to get there, and it was really interesting. This old monk explained to Asrat what these implements and some of the things were in this display, and then he would translate and tell me what the guy was saying to him. And this was a temple. There was no lights in here, but through those open windows, I was able to take flash photos, but I don't have time to show you that stuff this morning. But it was a really interesting visit to go over there. I want to try this again. I'm hoping, Jeremy, this doesn't get messed up, but I want to show you, this is typical Ethiopian traffic. So let me show you this. There is a stoplight connected, but it's not on. It's installed, but it's not working yet.
Yeah.
You notice there's no honking, no four-letter words, there's nobody yelling. It's just how traffic is there. I mean, everyone knows it, and it's okay. It's just how it is. So this is the air flight across. This is Ethiopian countryside. It's beautiful, but not particularly green. Kenya, on the other hand, had a lot of rain last year, and so Kenya was very, very green and very lush. In Kenya, one of my first stops is at a grocery store, and this is a nice store, kind of like you'd see here, only much, much smaller. But I need to get food for a week because in the town where I'm teaching, there's no place you'd want to buy meat or milk or anything like that. So I have to stock up and make sure I've got stuff. There's a recognizable symbol of the West there in Ethiopia. Typical, in Kenya, I'm in Kenya now. This is a typical shopping center in Kenya. I like this one. You can get any couch you want as long as it's blue. Sofa Afrique. Anyone familiar with I-10, where the famous Kenyan Olympic runners train? And so I've never driven through there in the morning. I've either been really early in the morning or late, like midday or in the afternoon. But I'm told that there are exceptional Kenyan athletes that train there, and they run all the time in this town, I-10. This is my friend Edwin Suter. I met him in 2018. He came to pick me up. He's a translator for Wycliffe. And he is in the middle of a 10-year-long project to translate the scriptures into the Marikwa tribal language, which is really cool. And he is just a terrific guy. I just love this man. So one of my students from last year, Moses, who's on the left, invited me to come to their little town. I was a little skittish about this, to be honest with you, but he wanted me to come and speak to their congregation. So I went and talked to them about parenting. So Luca is one of their elders. He's in the middle, and he's the guy who had the car. So they picked me up on Sunday morning, drove about an hour and a half through some beautiful area, but very bumpy road and that sort of thing. and they served me breakfast, and then they wanted me to walk up a hill because they said, we're going to plant a tree. What I didn't know was the tree was in my name, like there is a Scott Johnson tree on this hill. And I think that's like an honorary thing that they do. So right in this picture, I think is when he said, this is your tree. And I'm saying, it's my tree? Like I had no idea that's what they were really telling me the whole time. This was inside their church where they had some little kids, and I love just seeing the kids. Most of them don't speak English. It's a pretty small village. And this is the flyer that Moses had made, and he posted these all over the town. So they set up 3 tents, sort of in an L shape, and all the congregation sat under these tents while I spoke. Moses is there holding up a picture of my family, because I like to introduce my family when I go, and the Africans are very interested in seeing all that. And I'm taking the picture. But there was, I'd say, 150 people under these tents. What I didn't realize is I was going to be speaking in the sun, and I had about a 45-minute message plus translation time. I was out there for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So my face was fairly red when I got done. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But I'd probably bring that safari hat you saw me in the other picture next time. I asked them, the people to wave, and this is one of several pictures I got of that. Afterward, they gave me this sort of cloak that they put around me, and that was a very, very nice gift. I signed the guest book, and they said I was the first white person to ever sign their guest book. Where I teach, there's a mission hospital, and so there's lots of white doctors and medical staff that come from here and all over the place to serve there. But in this little town, they don't see white people, and so all the little kids, when they would see me, they would shout and yell and scream, and they were all happy and thought they'd really seen something. I'm sorry to disappoint them. I'm not that big a deal, but they thought it was pretty cool. This is my class in Kenya, and a couple things. Do you notice what they're all wearing? They all have coats on. So for me, I'm wearing a short sleeve like fishing, like a polyester fishing shirt, because for me, it's 75, 80 degrees in the afternoon. For them, it was cold. They would have these coats on the whole time, and they'd say to me, are you comfortable? Like, what they're saying is, aren't you freezing? And I'm like, I'm great, you know. I'm great, but this is what they're used to, is something much warmer than that. But these groups of people in Kenya, I mean, all of them have been just fantastic. This is typical lunch: cabbage, beans, and rice. I just put salt on it, and I'm good to go. And this is the kitchen. It's literally a wood-fired stove with 4 burners on it, and there's the 2 people that cook this lunch every day. Here's a whiteboard. I had written some things, some notes on it from teaching the book of Job. The Kenyans speak English, and so also one thing I love about being in Kenya is I ask them to read the scriptures, and they read out of their English Bibles with very thick Kenyan accents. And it takes an hour and a half to kind of acclimate to it, and it's helpful if I can see their lips talking, but boy, it was music to my ears for 4 days to hear them read the scriptures with their Kenyan accents. This is Pastor Robert. He's building a sizable church. They have not raised all the money. Unlike in the US, they do what they can with the money they have at the moment. So it just takes years to get something done. These stones are all dressed by hand. These are guys with hammers and chisels doing all the stone dressing. So in the back, you see the raw stones, and in the front, you see the ones that have been dressed. I want to try to play this for you. They gave me a blessing. And what they're doing is they're shaking yogurt up and then pouring it into a cup that I'm supposed to drink. I'm supposed to symbolically drink. So watch this. So again, I love these people. Am I still, yeah, it looks like I'm good this time, Joe. I don't know what happened last time, but I'm good this time. This is the supermarket. And I do go here, I buy tea for people that I know here that like tea. I'll buy loose tea or tea bags and bring them back. But again, this is not a place where anyone from the West would want to buy milk. There's no refrigerator in here. So it's not a place we'd want to buy meat or milk or anything like that. I thought I almost bought this for a very conservative friend of mine. The Kenyans are very proud of Obama. They're actually fairly conservative, and they appreciate the conservative side of American politics, but they're very proud of the fact that Obama has Kenyan heritage. And so you see Obama on lots of different shops and things like that there. And this was Obama cologne. That price is about $3.50. And I almost bought it. I thought, I couldn't be wasting money for that, but in the end, I didn't. These were my students for the week, for Job, Ruth, Jonah, and Esther in Kenya. Edmund took me on a drive, and we saw some just gorgeous countryside. On the way back, these two ladies, he bought some firewood. He also has a wood stove at home, and he needed firewood for the stove. And so what do you notice about this? Like, if you're in manufacturing at all, what do you notice about this? Is that how you're supposed to pick something up? Like, not from where we are, right? We're told to squat down with our legs and then push back up. But I mean, you see people in Kenya doing this all over the place, and they're not leaning down the way I would lean. Their legs are like straight up, and they're just completely bending down from the waist. I thought that was very interesting. This is how I cook breakfast every day in Kenya. A little tiny stove, no electric spark, so I light the burners. I cooked up some onions and peppers and some ham. The ham isn't quite like our ham, but it was close enough. Put some eggs in there. I boil water for coffee in the back. Put a little cheese on top. This is my coffee maker. It's a little strainer, basically a little funnel strainer, and you put the coffee in there and set it on top of a coffee cup, so you end up with a cup of coffee like that. And then that was breakfast. This is breakfast most days. It's a good thing I was walking a fair amount, because I don't normally eat this much for breakfast, and I should have probably put on 10 pounds while I was there. This is lady who did the laundry, and again, she's stooping that same way, but she's got 3 buckets: soap, and then the first rinse and the second rinse, and this is how she did laundry. It was all line dried. This is Shadrach on the left. He leads the School of Theology, the Kapsawar School of Theology, where I taught, and this is his family. And the little girl in the right, her name is Patience, and she became a fast friend of mine in 2018. I wish I had more time to tell you more stories about her, but she and Pastor Robert and I took a walk through the town. She is just this year learning a little bit of English, but we still really couldn't communicate. But she just, for whatever reason, she just thinks I'm cool, and she likes to hang out with me when I'm there. So I love that little girl. This is the view from where we walked to. This is Pastor Robert standing where he will be preaching when the church is finished. So he'll be there speaking to his congregation. I just wanted to show you some of the shops. You see a pharmacy there. Here's a hotel. It's not really a place to stay, it's a restaurant. So this is a hotel and butchery. Again, the meat is not kept refrigerated. It's not a place where we would want to source our meat, but it's what they do. Appliances and so forth, school uniforms, chemist. A chemist is also a pharmacist. So basically that's a medical or a pharmacy place. These are students that I had to teach parenting to in Kenya. And I can tell you a couple stories about that, but I know I don't have time this morning. I wish I did. I appreciate the time that I have, but I want to get to kind of what happened in Uganda. But this class was just wonderful. And many of them did not speak English. A lot of villagers and people from their church came. And so for this, Silas was pressed into service. He was one of my students for the 4 books, and he agreed to be my translator for that day and just did just a wonderful job. So this is what the students would have seen with me up there at the front. There I am with Patience. And they had a graduation for all the Bible college students, and Patience sat with me for the graduation, which I loved. This is the flight from Kenya to Uganda, and I saw some of the most gorgeous clouds. And I will admit that I used the iPhone photo correction features to bring out the colors, because these pictures were taken through scratched up, dingy airplane windows, and the iPhone photo correction is nothing short of astonishing. But it really brought out the detail on some of these clouds. I don't think I've ever seen prettier clouds anywhere in my entire life. So we landed, and on the left there is Ellen. Little did I know Ellen was going to become my human crutch at the end of the week. And then in the middle is Samuel. Samuel is the associate pastor who reached out to me on Facebook and said, would you come and teach in Uganda? And he arranged for this. In the truck, when they picked me up, I noticed what I thought was a folding table. And I'll come back to that later on. And so they drove me back from the airport in Uganda where I landed. It's about a 5-hour drive to the village where I taught. And so this is right outside the Ugandan airport. The houses look a little bit more like something you might see in the West. Similar building methods to what you saw in Ethiopia, very similar. I thought this was interesting. Jesus Reigns household furniture. You can buy your furniture at Jesus Reigns Furniture Shop. This is a common sight also in Ethiopia. If you'll notice, this building is still under construction, but the first floor is occupied. Like, you would never see that in the US, right? You would never see anything where consumers or business people are actually using office space or retail space while the upper floors are still being built. And this is very common in Africa in the 3 places I've been. We pulled up to the church. Now, when Samuel said, I want you to teach at our church, I was picturing something very basic. But what I was picturing that was basic was like a vinyl tile floor and cinder block walls. I was not picturing wood slat walls and open air and dirt floors. I had no idea. I just assumed, and what I saw when we pulled up was even more basic than what I had imagined it to be. This was a group of people that was there to welcome me when I got there. And this is inside the church. The whole thing was open air. But I mean, I loved the time here. I just loved the time here. This is Hedwig. She runs an orphanage there, which is where I stayed. Probably 12 dormitory houses, and I'll show you the picture of the playground in their kitchen. But Hedwig was part of arranging me to come. Samuel was really the impetus behind it. This is the kitchen where they cook for the orphans. So again, a wood-fired stove. And notice the haze at the top of the picture. That haze is literally the smoke from the wood stove, and it collects until it gets down to the level of the windows. And when it gets down to the level of the windows, it can escape out the windows. But the whole, top half of the inside of this building is full of smoke and presumably carbon monoxide, but all the windows are open all the time. So it works. It's just how they do it. There's a playground where some of the kids are playing, and another picture of that. My one regret I have from this trip is I really didn't have time to spend with the kids after everything that happened. And I am anxious to go back to all 3 of these places, and anxious to go back in Uganda to have more time to hang out with them. So the thing that I thought was a folding table, I had told them I need a whiteboard to teach. I've got to have a whiteboard, and Samuel, in this case, wrote most of the stuff on the whiteboard. The thing I thought was a table was a whiteboard. They didn't have a whiteboard. I was picturing him going down to one of the 3 Spartan classrooms in my imaginary cinder block building with vinyl tile floor and just dragging a whiteboard in. Little did I know, the church is one building with no windows and a dirt floor, and there was no whiteboard. So they bought the whiteboard for my time there, and they assembled it the morning the teaching started. And I was the first person ever to write on this whiteboard, probably a distinction that I'll never have again, not that it's any big deal. This was interesting, a little keyboard maintenance. It's all outdoors, it gets dusty. And he had a blower, and he was just blowing all the dust and dirt and all that sort of thing out of that keyboard. Never had seen that before. This is my group in Uganda for the teaching on Job, Ruth, Jonah, and Esther. It was a sizable group. I was really impressed at what Samuel pulled together because, I was out in the sticks. And I knew some of these people had come from maybe 100, 150 kilometers away, say 60 to 100 miles away, something like that. And they don't drive cars. And it's the same in Ethiopia. When I teach there, they don't have cars. They walk, they use taxis, they use bikes, there's maybe some public transportation, but it's not like here, where you just jump in your car and drive for an hour. So I really appreciated their commitment to be there. This is my whiteboard in the Runyoro language that was used in Uganda. And again, 42 chapters of Job on the left, 6 things that cause suffering on the right, kind of where did it all happen, kind of a little map there in the middle with the circles. And so that was the whiteboard at the first day in Uganda. That evening in Uganda, my first evening there, which was a Tuesday, it was a beautiful, beautiful evening. It had rained. It was a little damp, but it was cooling off, and the sky was clearing. And when you're in Africa and you're outside of a city, the sky is black. Like, it's not like here where you can only see so many stars. It is black as black. So I put my slippers on, I took a plastic chair out in front, and I sat down. I was just going to watch the stars when they came out, when the clouds cleared away. And these 2 beautiful young ladies, Rita on the left and Margaret on the right, they came out to me and they said, "We're going to take a walk. Would you like to go with us?" And I said, "Well, where are you going?" And they said, "We're going to walk through all these houses and say goodnight to the kids. They're all getting ready for bed." Now, I'm a, kind of middle-aged man from America, and we're trained, I think, to not even want to have a hint of any impropriety, right? So the first thought that went through my mind was, I'm uncomfortable with it because I've been conditioned here. So I said to them, "Are you sure that's okay?" And they were like, "Oh, we do this all the time." I said, "That sounds great." So I went back in, put my shoes on, came out, and I walked with them. And the road, there's no paved anything there. the houses they build are pretty nice, and they're level floors and tile and everything like that, but between the houses, there's no level anything. So they walked with me down this muddy road because it had rained. It was very uneven and lots of rocks kind of tucked into the mud. So it was, very uneven surface. But I had this little flashlight in my pocket. It wasn't very bright, but it was bright enough. They kept telling me to slow down, and I got this flashlight up, and they're like, oh, you've got a flashlight. So we walked to the first house. In the first house, there was 2 dorms. We go in the one on the right. All these little girls are getting ready for bed. I loved seeing them. I don't know any of their names, or I don't really even have much of the visual anymore, but I just love seeing these kids getting ready for bed. Walked in the left room, same thing. Walked out, walked into the next house, went to the one room on one side, the room on the other side, said goodnight to the kids. But this time, instead of coming out the same door, these 2 young ladies walked out the other side of the house. And they went down some steps right in the center. Well, the whole back of the house was a porch, maybe 5 feet wide, and it ran the whole length of the house. And what I should have done was I should have followed them down the steps. Then I had that flashlight in my pocket. What I also should have done if I wasn't going to follow them is I should have used the dang flashlight that I had in my pocket already. So I walked along the edge to the edge of the house, and there was one light bulb on the porch. And so I could see about 15 feet away, I could see grass. I couldn't see anything right below the step I was about to take. And I thought, well, there's grass. I'm taking about a 30-inch step, about 2.5 feet down. I thought there's grass down there, and that's fine, I could do that. So I stepped down, assuming I would go down 2.5 feet and hit grass. And next thing I know, both feet were in terrific pain, and I was rolling in the grass and trying to figure out what on earth had happened. And as I sort of gathered myself, as I sort of got my bearings again, I felt something in my right ankle go back into place. I never felt it come out because everything was happening too fast. But I felt it go back into place, and I knew when it went back into place, it was better than it had been just before it went back in. I also knew from the pain, I knew this is not a 5-minute deal. This is not like I stubbed my toe. This is not like I sprained my ankle and I'm going to have a little limp. I could not stand up on my own. I could not take a single step. And these 2 women, I would use the term waif, W-A-I-F. I looked it up. It's a thin and smallish woman. I would say each of them might have weighed 100 pounds. I weighed 200 pounds, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't stand up on my own. So I have one on one side, one on the other side, probably holding, my guess is they're holding 75 pounds apiece. They're probably supporting 3/4 of my weight. At this point, we were probably 300 feet from the house that I was staying in. That's where we needed to get back to. And remember, I told you the road was very bumpy. It was slick. It had holes and dips and rocks tucked into it, and every step was painful. And I couldn't take a step more than 6 to 12 inches at a time. That's as far as I could step. So I don't know, 300, 400, 500 steps to get back. And these 2 gals could not have been kinder. They kept apologizing, and I kept telling them, this is not your fault. I took this picture when we got back, and I had to order them to smile. I said, I do not want to be the person that takes your smiles away tonight, because you were doing a very nice thing for me, walking me through these dorms, and it's not your fault. I will tell you, a couple of times on the way back, I literally chuckled out loud. And I chuckled out loud because I had just taught Job through chapter 3. And I thought, I know, right? I know here and I know here. This is no surprise to God. There's no accident. This isn't an accident. This is something God has for me on this trip. To this day, I don't really understand why, but you know what? I don't need to know that. God doesn't owe me that, and I don't need it. All I know is there's nothing outside of God's control. So I just chuckled out loud thinking God knew this was going to happen. Not only did he know it was going to happen, it's part of what he's doing for me, not to me, but for me on this trip. And so you can't teach Job, right, and react any other way to it, or at least I didn't think so. So that was my left foot. This is about 30 minutes after I fell. It wasn't all black and blue yet, but you can see the huge lump there in the middle of it. It turned out to be what they call a Lisfranc fracture, and I won't bore you with the details, but the left foot was in fact worse than the right foot, and it was more painful at the time. The right foot was more in the ankle, and you see that glob right there. Well, a friend of mine, not a close friend, but a friend of mine that used to go to our church was Dr. Brad Beasley. Is anyone familiar with Brad? So I had his cell number in my phone, and I actually had decent cell service. So I texted him and I said, Brad, I'm in Africa. I've fallen. I think it's pretty bad. Would you mind if I send you photos? He said, of course. He was doing telemedicine with me. I was probably, I don't know, 8,000 miles away. I'm not sure how far away I was. I was a long ways away. It was about noon here, and by then it was about 9 o'clock at night there. So Brad was most concerned about this leg. He said, I think you've broken the small bone in that leg. And he said, it may not be too bad, but it puts the thicker bone at much greater risk because it's not stable. And he said, if you break that bone, you will really be in serious shape. Now, I will tell you something else. The whole time I was there, I kept thinking, I want to finish the teaching. I only had 3 days to teach in Uganda. We'd only covered Job to chapter 3. You can't stop Job at chapter 3. There's 42 chapters in the book. I thought, I want to finish Job. And I'd also come to teach marriage, and Samuel had all these people coming to learn about marriage. So I really wanted to finish that. And so in my mind, pretty much the whole time was, what do I need to do for the next 1 minute? Like right after I fell, I needed to get back to that house. What do I need to do in the next hour? What needs to happen then? I want to finish the teaching, and I need to get home. And those were the kind of order of operations that I think occupied my mind the rest of the time I was there. I'll also, well, let me go on from here. So Brad said to me, you need to splint that leg. Well, you know, there's not a medical supply cabinet like that. So Alan went out with the big knife that he had, which you'll see in a minute, and he literally cut off some straight branches off of a shrub, and he split them down the middle, and I had the coolest splints ever. They wrapped my leg with a baby blanket, put the splints on there, and then put an athletic wrap around those. So that's Alan putting it all on. There's Alan with the knife that he used to cut these splints. And that was Francis next to him, who's a social worker. And Francis was a big help for the next couple of days also. I got my leg elevated and went to sleep. The next day we went to a Catholic charity hospital. This is Dr. Ibrahim Boyoga. He was the ER doctor. Brad had texted me, said, I want you to get 6 x-rays of each foot and ankle. He texted me the list of them, so we went to this little hospital, had to see the doctor first so that he could order the x-rays, which he did, and I loved meeting these guys. Then I went to see William Saramaga. He's the radiologist, so he's a doctor, but he was a one-man radiology department. He set my leg where he wanted it. He adjusted the machine. He went around the corner to a room with leaded glass. He pressed the button. He came back, and get this, he developed the x-rays in a room with a red light and 3 trays of liquid. Anyone ever done that, like years ago with black and white film? Like, I'd never seen an x-ray done that way. When I was a kid, we were more advanced than that. This is the oldest x-ray equipment I'd ever seen in my life. He would come out with the films and they were dripping water. He said to me, I don't think you have a break. I don't see a break. And the Lisfranc fracture is a different kind of break, so he didn't see that on there. But the bone that Dr. Brad was concerned about was in fact not broken. So that was really good news. So I texted the photos to Brad. He said, I agree with him. I don't see a break, and you don't have to wear the splint anymore. For the rest of the time, I lost Wednesday morning, but I compressed Job into Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning. And I taught mostly sitting down just like this. I taught the rest of Job. We taught marriage. This was the group for marriage. When I taught marriage, Pastor Robert stood up and he started talking in Runyoro. I couldn't understand what he was saying. And when you're teaching, it's a little unsettling when someone just jumps up and starts talking, much less in a language that you can't really understand what he's saying. But Samuel later told me that he related to the group a story where his wife said she didn't feel like that he listened to her. And it was perfect. You could see by the emotion, you can see it in these photos, you could see by the emotion, you know, how he was emoting to the group, what had happened between he and his wife. So it was a wonderful moment. There's Samuel. There's the young ladies again. Lorna at the left is not a waif. Lorna has a little more bulk on her. And when we got back to the house, she was a big help also in helping me out. But there's Lorna and then Margaret and Rita the day that I left. By then I could walk on a level floor very slowly, but I could not do steps. And there's probably 8 steps going up into the house. I had to have help going everywhere. KFC again, Alan and I stopped at this restaurant, very nice open air restaurant in Uganda. So one of my travel insurance policies did come through, And one flight, the business class was full, but I got 3 coach seats. So I've never before boarded a flight where I had boarding passes for 3 seats. I'm sure it'll never happen again. I had 5 D, E, and F. One funny story, I got on the plane and looked at 5 D, E, and F, and they were bulkhead seats, which sounds great until you remember that there's no tray tables on the bulkhead seats. The tray tables are in the armrests, and so you can't raise the armrest. Well, the whole point of having 3 seats was I could sit sideways and put my feet up because they were all swollen. So I said to the flight attendant, I need 3 seats that I can sit across. Can you see if there's a row further back? And he snapped into action. He went to row 6. And he said, would the 3 of you mind moving up? They were happy to get the bulkhead seats. And so here I am in row 6. This is George, who got me through the airport there with the wheelchair service. And there I am in row 6 with my feet up. This is what I looked like most of the flight back. This is the young kid in Turkey, in Istanbul, in the airport, who wheeled me through the airport there. This is the guy who got me from the waiting area in Turkey to the gate. This is the kid that ran me around in Chicago. I mean, I had the wheelchair service. I learned how it worked, and it actually works really, really well. This was the kid in Tulsa that wheeled me around. This is Dr. Brad. He's the guy that did telemedicine. I ended up with 2 operations on my left foot. One to put some hardware in to hold everything together while the soft tissue grew back. And then the second one, 3 months later, to take it all back out after the soft tissue was solid enough to hold it together. That operation to take it out was March 13th. And that was the last day, as it turned out, that they could do what they called elective surgeries because of COVID. If it hadn't been done March 13th, I would have waited 2 more months. It wouldn't have been a big deal. I would have had to wear the boot the whole time. But because of that, I was able to get it out just before all the COVID shut down. That's a picture that Brad took during surgery. And that's some of the stuff he put into my left foot. And so I had this boot on for quite a while after that. And that's a picture of it taken later on. So you can see there was, I think, a total of 6 screws and 1 plate in there holding everything together, waiting for the soft tissue to grow back. That was Christmas morning. It was a major operation just to get me into my mother-in-law's condominium for Christmas morning breakfast. It took both of my sons and my son-in-law pretty much to get me up. There was like, I don't know, 10 steps there, something like that. Let me go back to Uganda because I couldn't figure out when I fell and I looked back. See how we're doing on time. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm running a little late, but I'm almost done. When I fell and I looked back with the flashlight on my phone, I remember seeing distinctly a concrete drainage gutter. And so it was right next to the house. It was to channel water away. And I thought to myself, that's what I didn't see. I didn't see that. And I asked Hedwig in Uganda to send me a photo of what the house looked like. And she said, this is the porch you stepped off. I don't see a concrete drainage gutter there. And I was sure I saw that. And I didn't remember that step there. And I said, are you sure that's the house? And she says, well, I've talked to Rita and Margaret. That's definitely where you stepped off. So she ended up doing FaceTime with me a few days later. It was in the early evening for them, in the morning for me. And what I didn't realize when I stepped off that porch, I stepped off the gray level. There was another step below that, and then, you can't see it in those pictures, but there was a concrete drainage gutter. That's what I stepped into. So it was a perfect, if you could devise a machine to just mess up somebody's feet where they were stepping off and they didn't know what they were stepping into, it probably would look something like that. But again, the thing I would say is, and this is how I want to encourage you guys this morning. First of all, thanks for letting me take you to Africa with me in a very brief way, a very summarized way. But there was never a time in all this that I was upset with God. To me, it was part of what he did for me on the trip. I won't say I understand it. I don't really completely understand it, but I don't need to understand it. We don't need to understand what God's doing in our lives, and he doesn't owe us that. What we need to do, and I'm not saying I do this, please don't hear me saying I have this whipped or I have this down, but I was able to do it on this trip. What we need to do is just trust him. There's never a time that he's not trustworthy, completely trustworthy. Never a time. And that's what I'd want to leave you with. So that's really what I stepped off. I hit that sort of terracotta colored step, and then I hit the drainage ditch. And after that, the whole trip was different than that had been going so well up to that point, right? But I was able to finish the teaching. I was able to get home. And here's one more thought. I think to myself of how much worse it could have been. I could have fallen backward. I could have hit my back. I could have hit my head. I could have had a compound fracture with bones sticking out. I'll tell you, I don't think you want to be in Africa and have a wound, an open wound, that could easily get quite infected. I'm sure they would have taken care of it, but if I'm going to have that, I'd much rather be here for that. I mean, there are so many ways in which this could have been so much worse. I was completely aware I was coherent. I didn't do anything that knocked me out or anything like that. There are so many ways this could have been so much worse. I'm grateful to God he let me finish the teaching. He got me back home, basically on schedule. Dr. Brett met us at his office at 10:30 at night on a Saturday. That gets me emotional to think of that. God was good. And look at all the people I was able to teach. I mean, there's nothing better than that. So you guys, thank you this morning for letting me speak to you. Thank you for letting me take you to Africa through pictures. I really appreciate the time. Jeremy, thank you for all the help with setup. And Nick, I'm not sure if Nick's still here, but thank you to Nick. There you are. Thank you, Nick. I couldn't see above the computer back there. Thank you, buddy. Thank you guys for being here. I really, really appreciate it.